Welcome to The Fix,
the new way to get your copy reviewed by two former copy chiefs.
because whether you're an aspiring copywriter or you've been in the industry for decades,
The best way to improve your work isn't to read books, blog posts, or online guides.
it's to see real writing, your writing, being reviewed and improved in front of your eyes.
And that's the goal of The Fix, to bring you inside a virtual writer's room
And watch along as we review, edit and rewrite real copy.
from real writers like you. So let's get straight into this week's episode. And remember, if you like what you see here,
Please share The Fix with anyone you think would find it valuable. It is completely free.
hello. I probably should have thought about how I introduced this episode, seeing as I am in the host seat for this, and I haven't. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. Seamless segue, because we want to talk about openings. We got an email from a copywriter who posed a challenge more than a piece of copy. And as much as possible, email us in with any piece of copywriting theory or things that you get stuck with. Drop us a line and let us know, and we will discuss them. And we want to discuss one today. To give you a bit of background, what the issue really is about openings and how you open a piece of copy. So we're not talking really about the headlines so much, but the kind of the first line, the first few paragraphs. How do you engage someone with your writing? Now, the person who asked me to cover this came with this challenge because every time they would submit a piece of copy, someone would go, well, I like when it gets going, I'm in there, but just that opening didn't quite get me. It felt a bit dry, it felt a bit stiff. And so me and Nick were talking about this idea, and it's something that is obviously so crucial to any piece of copy. If you can't get past the first paragraph, the first line, you're in big trouble. But how you do that, it's very difficult to initially write the perfect first line, whether that's an article, a blog post, a short ad. Chances are you're not going to write the very first line the very first time. You might do, but then that might move around and what have you. So what we want to discuss today is really how do you go about finding the right opening for a piece of copy. Nick, what's your kind of opening gambit thoughts on that? I've got my own flavour, but I think we'll be quite similar here, I've got a feeling.
Well, it's by far the hardest part of copywriting. As a little aside, I actually wrote one of my dissertations at university on first lines of novels. So I've always had and I'm still, in fact, I think around Christmas time we should do a first lines of novels quiz. I'll see how many you can get, because you're a very, very well-read man.
Yes.
Or you claim to be. Well, you certainly own a lot of books.
Well, I've found that many books, I buy all these books, and very few of them have pictures, so you can get through very quickly.
Yeah, that's true. But, so I've always had a sort of soft spot for that field of writing, I suppose, because it's the same in a novel, isn't it? Can you hook someone from the very first line? So the examples that I always used to use in the fictional world are, is it Albert Camus, the Idiot? I think it's called The Idiot, but the first line is mother died yesterday.
The Stranger.
Or maybe it was the day before. Yeah. Whatever, or something like The Outsider, that's it. But that thing of like how much can you pack into that first opening paragraph. The other one that I always used to go back to was The Catcher in the Rye, which I won't quote, but is another very famous one. It tells you an awful lot, packs an awful lot of information. And that's a roundabout way of saying that's the sort of standard I try and hold myself to. How much can I say in that first line? How much can I pack into that first line? So I find it doubly difficult to do. And it's still the thing where it causes the most agitation in my house, because I find until I've written a first line that I'm happy with, now that doesn't mean it will end up in the final draft, but I'm happy with, I can't give myself permission to write the rest of what I've got. So I might have an idea in my head, I'll go downstairs and Gemma and the kids are down there, and even she can tell what I'm getting, and I have to say to her, I just can't work out how to start it. I know exactly what I'm going to say after that. I know where I'm going to go, but I just can't start it. And I just have to stand there at the desk, my standing desk, obviously. Just have to grit your teeth, and it may take 2 or 3 hours, but you always move past it. You find that line that gets you in, might not, but I do find it difficult. So I tend to try and find exercises or shortcuts that enable me to tick that box internally. Think, okay, that's a decent opening line. I can go on from here. But we know that those things might lack sort of originality because they'll be slightly more formulaic. So then that becomes a problem. So perhaps we can talk about the formula, but then also how to break out of that.
There's also two elements to that, isn't there? Because I think one thing that I certainly want to get across is that, as I say, chances are the first line that you write, so you're talking about like almost a functional first line that gets you to start writing.
Yeah.
And gets you in the right mindset to be able to write that piece.
Well, shall I give you an example? So an if-then.
Yeah.
An if-then system. If you want to learn to write copy, then you need to watch The Fix.
Yeah, so that gets you into you writing about the thing, gets your points there. Maybe you've done some planning to get there if you're being a good boy today kind of thing, and you know where you're going with the piece. Yeah. But then when you come back to review that piece, that because necessarily that was a functional line for you to get into it, is that the best line for a reader who's coming to it cold? Probably not.
Almost certainly not.
You need to go and reassess that first line and reassess the opening. And I think I am an inherently lazy person, especially when it comes to writing, considering how much I write. I mean, we've both grown up writing long copy sales letters. That sounds like we were doing it since we've been like in play school, just writing massive ones out on like Duplo bricks and stuff. But I've wrote 10,000 words letters. I now write novels that are ridiculously long and what have you. So I write a lot, but I don't like rewriting and doing that stuff. I actually do. I have a perverse pleasure of that, but I don't want to do it unnecessarily.
Yeah, your first instinct is to try and get it right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you do have to go back and have a look. And invariably, the thumb test, you probably come across it, of placing your thumb over the first part of any copy, the chances are you can delete the first line straight away anyway. So just do that. But what you need to be doing is getting in that mindset of going, right, okay, remind myself and don't beat myself up that I'm having to rewrite the opening every time, because the opening was functionally there for you to get writing in the first place. Now it's for you to get to the next sentence. What an opening line ultimately needs to do, and this, interesting your thoughts on this, Nick, but it's always stuck in my mind the idea that a first line really, the only function, and maybe disagree with me, but the only function of the first line is to get you reading the second line. That is essentially the only thing it needs to do. Obviously, it needs to get you in thing, but more than anything else, it's to get you onto that second line. And when you start thinking about it in those terms, it allows you to unpack a little bit more, because often what I find people are they might come from like a journalist background or like writing an essay at college or something, where it's all about exposition, it's all about leading and getting all of that information, like you say, trying to open a book with so much and unpack so much detail. But sometimes that might be a bit of a foolhardy thing to try, because really what you're trying to do is get to the next sentence. So when you think about it like that, it gives you a different, just a different angle to go with and go, well, do I want to read on to the next piece now? So it's doing different things. So I think that's a very useful, I find, way of just, when I feel overwhelmed, I think about how do I start this? Go, does that opening get me to the next bit? Does it do that? Then I can start putting details in it. But
well, that's certainly true. I mean, why don't we unpack some of the more formulaic things first? Because I think there's a lot of validity to them. So an if-then. The reason these things tend to work is because they'll either make a claim of some sort, which we know claim or promise is going to help us in the world of copywriting. They're going to start a story in some way, or they're going to open a loop. So they're going to give you a reason to read the next line for one of those reasons. But so you could do an if-then. If you are X, then Y. You can start by saying, what if? What if the answer to losing more weight this year was avocados. You know, usually you use some sort of, paradox is the wrong word, a contrast, a strange combination of elements. Like, what if this thing that you want, what if the answer to this thing was this? So that's a claim. Sometimes you just make a really compelling statement. You know, what was the one? We were talking about this over brunch this morning, where you were talking about there was a cat on my face, but more about that later, whatever it might be. That's just
I mean, I'm lost by the context of this and why I was saying there's a cat on my face. But
no,
yeah.
but you know, you said that at breakfast, but you know, it's a strange statement, but it's almost so strange that it forces you to read on to find an answer. I think that's a weaker way in, but it's our way in. Another one would be make a prediction. You know, in the next 3 months, X. These are all just things of forcing you to say something of consequence. I think we talked about this in one of the very first episodes we did, but imagine in your head that you start, you know, it was a dark, stormy night, or a long, long time ago in a land far, far. But don't write that, write the next line. So just write the first line of a story that comes to you. Just try and go through some of those things, because one of those things might get you. It's about approaching the target, right? Like, we don't know what that perfect first line is, and we never do. Otherwise, it would be easy, and we wouldn't be recording this episode. So we know that we're approaching something important and sort of unknowable. How do we take steps that get us closer to that? Make a prediction, make a bold statement, open a story, and then some of the things not to do. You know, make sure you, if in doubt, are you using the word you? Are you talking directly to the reader? And just try to avoid clearing your throat. So you do see a lot from junior writers where it's like, you're never going to believe this, but I've just heard, or I suppose everybody's telling stories like this at the moment, so I'll offer my, you know, just something that's like a, you know, it's like that, the linguistic equivalent of that. Just watch out for those things. So try some of those positive things that I suggested, or watch out for those things. Will get you closer.
Yeah.
It might, I think, to your point, it might strip your copy of some life. But I think it's such an important issue that if you put it on a pedestal and you say it has to be fresh, inventive, compelling, pack an emotional punch, you'll almost never write it.
Yeah.
So how do you get halfway there?
Yeah, and well, that's why also I think it's worth remembering. You just need to get them to the next bit. Like, you're not trying to do too much stuff. It's not a headline. Like, if you're on a complex where this is the opening line of a thing, or it's the subject line, you've already got them into a little bit kind of thing. So there is already a suspension of disbelief going on where they're going to allow you some extra time now. You're in it. You've got a little bit more time because something's got them to read this next piece, whether it's an article or an ad or whatever. One thing I also think you mentioned there, like, you don't quite know where you're going, maybe, and maybe you don't, but actually I would argue that almost, well, we speak many times that you need to know where you're going with any piece of copy. You don't know quite how you're going to get there, but it is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's my point. That's a really important point. You're not trying to work the idea out. No. You need to know exactly where you're going. What your problem is, I can't find a compelling way of starting into that idea. There's a big difference. If your problem is you've got a blank piece of paper and you don't know where to start, writing a first line ain't going to help you.
No.
You're going to use all those techniques that I just used and write something rubbish because it won't have an idea.
Yep.
So you need to know exactly where you're going.
Which is why what I would, another, like, just that these are little cheats and tricks if you're trying it, that will just maybe push you towards where you need to get to. But if you should know what the point you're making is.
Yep.
So rather than trying to be clever or trying to get you find a interesting way in, we can do that later. But what's the point? What's your conclusion? What are you trying to say? What is the takeaway that you need to get away, get the reader to go away with here? Open with that and just use that as your opening. Literally write. It might not be the most compelling piece of copy or whatever. It might be a bit kind of loaded and make a lot of assumptions because you've not explained your case, but it's going to give you that clarity of the idea and it will get you going. A piece of advice I used to give people would, if you try and condense ultimately any piece of copy should be able to be condensed into one single line. Ultimately, this is this, so this is why you want to buy this thing. Whatever your point is, write that first line and write it twice. So you've literally got it there at the top and then another thing, and then write the article between that, so that you have, moving down the page as you go, that opening line is there and it's the point of the piece. So A, that will allow you to keep on track and just keep you on the kind of rule of one idea, because you're going, well, that next sentence doesn't lead to my point because I've gone too far off, so I need to bring it back in. Yep. So it's a nice little exercise like that. It's like almost having like training on the pads on the bowling kind of thing, where it just keeps you tucked in. Then once you've got the piece there, you'll often, you might find that it works, or you can almost remove them and you've probably got the exciting opening there anyway, kind of thing. But it's just another way of like, start with the conclusion. What are you trying to say? Just say that and then get into the piece and then come back, and you'll probably be able to delete that kind of stabilizer, and what's left is often a better way in anyway.
You know, you're right, but although I do think stabilizer is the wrong word, the word I use for all of these writing exercises is scaffolding.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've talked about this before, and I want to do a whole episode on this because I think it's... Now, scaffolding, I've stolen that term from my wife, who's a teacher.
And a scaffolder.
And a scaffolder, yes, she teaches children to scaffold. It's not the greatest business in the world because they don't have the shoulders for it. But
what a niche, what a niche.
No, that's how you teach people. But you're sort of applying that same logic to yourself. So all of these things are kind of exercises, structures you can use that just help you approach what you're trying to do. So I gave some examples earlier. You know, you might say, do you know what? Today I'm just going to write one of each of those archetypes just to see how they feel. But you could also say, right, how could I make my reader feel angry in one line? Boris Johnson's going to go down as the greatest prime minister in history. And president.
And president, yeah.
that might make your reader feel happy, depending on who you're writing to.
Yeah.
It's probably going to make them feel angry.
You might just end it all there.
They might think, oh, God, what's he going to do now? Well, okay, how might I elicit that emotion? Okay, it has to be in some way in the direction of the copy that you're writing. But just think about your reader and think, okay, how can I make them angry? What's the most exciting thing I could tell them now? How could I shock them? What's the most controversial thing I could say? What's the worst? What's the last thing they want to hear? Just ask yourself those questions, and maybe you're just, okay, well, the worst thing to say to them now might be this. Well, just write it down and see. You never know. Sometimes doing the opposite to what you think will be good, you know, whatever you think the opposite. We talked about this before. I think that's a Paul Arden book of just push against what you think might be good. But just, if in doubt, structure your thinking like that and just force yourself to write one of those things. And I'm pretty sure one of them will yield something, and then the creative part of you will take over and say, oh, actually, if I just changed it a little bit like that. So you just try to say the most controversial thing you could say about your product, but actually, oh, hang on, there's a little kernel of something cool there. I've just combined that with a what if, and maybe I've got something.
This is unfair of me and completely unprompted, and you might not be able to answer it. But what are your bank account details? No, what is?
That's not unprompted. Yeah. You're always asking me that.
I know. What would you say is a good opening? How would you define a good opening to a piece of copy?
I suppose, to me, it's just, when you say it leads you on to the next line, I think it has to be more than that, doesn't it? It has to demand that you read the next line.
Yeah.
It has to, to me, it probably both opens a loop and makes a promise, probably. But there's tons of copy where it just says, hi, my name's such and such. It tends to be the next line that is the true opening line. But it doesn't do that much. But sometimes it can, you know, can be in that sort of direction. But to me, probably something that, opens a loop, so it's a hook in some way makes a claim, whether implied or otherwise. I don't mean, promises me I can make £435, you know, I don't mean like that, but just implies some value, and probably is going to lead me in the direction of being able to tell a story very quickly. So if I look back at copy I've written, where I've been able to either start straight away with a story or hit them with one line and then get straight into a story, a line that says, you know, 113-year-old innovation is about to change the world. To understand why, you need to hear this story, something like that. I look back and think, packs quite a punch, has quite a lot in there, quite a lot of detail, makes a claim, and then I was off and I was telling my story and I was in. To me, that's a good opening line.
Yeah, I always think about it in terms of drama for some reason. I come back to the word drama a lot. I'm not sure if it's the most useful way of describing it, but that's openings. Often it is a case of seeing it and going, yeah, that's got me. And what gets you, as you say there, like some things, it is that claiming thing, but it's got to have a little bit of drama to it for me. I always think that's a good way of leaning. I think very much in not just novelistic terms, but in film and.
But drama is about the unknown, isn't it? What's going to happen next?
Yeah,
that's what's dramatic, and what's going to happen next is another way of talking about a knowledge gap or a hook.
Yeah.
It's the unknown part.
And it's getting you to the next sentence. It's the same kind of thing, that it's flowing you on and getting you there. I think it's a good reminder. We talk a lot about where you get influence and how you get ideas and all this kind of, but this for me, when it comes to opening pieces of copy and how do you get that opening, and a lot of it is how long is a piece of string and what have you, but I think this is where, particularly if you only read marketing books, if you only read copy, if you only read the thing, you need to be watching films. You need to be critically watching films and reading them with and TV programs and what have you. But looking at podcasts these days, there's a lot of very well-structured podcasts that keep you engaged and only have words to keep you going, kind of thing. You need to be looking at how do they open those things. I've been listening to John Ronson's latest thing, kind of thing, and they're doing the same thing. They're just giving you a little hook to keep you listening, to keep you engaged, and keep thinking. And you hear these and see a film. A film will start, Tarantino film with a box in the head or whatever, or something halfway into the drama, and you'll see that and think, right, well, there's a knowledge gap here. What's happened? Yeah, I need to read on. And it's those principles, I think. When I'm certainly thinking about opening a piece of copy, how do I recreate a little bit of that in the opening? How do I get someone excited, get them going, okay, I need to read on to find what's going on here, kind of thing. I need to plant a seed and get people on. And it's that feeling of drama that I'm looking for. The problem that people will probably find is that when you're still working out what you're writing, when you're kind of filling it with exposition for yourself, if you leave that there, it is all just exposition. It's all background. It's all stuff that I might need, but I probably don't need it until paragraph 3 or 4 that I'm down. I'm already into the piece. So again, if you are struggling with this, if you've a very simple thing, just take the first couple of paragraphs and put them down. And it doesn't mean you necessarily delete what's there. Your opening, when you're doing the working out, so to speak, that might be valid copy, but it just might need to go down further in the copy. So
I think drama is one, that's, a knowledge gap. Emotion is the other, isn't it? Yeah. Sure. Or possibly just a claim. Now, a claim should inherently be emotional. We've talked about, the chair that helps you with about, do you have a bad back? That's, I don't know, there's a compellingly emotional statement to somebody who does have that, talks directly to the reader's problem, so it's emotional in that sense. But it also kind of implies a claim, right? Like, I'm about to give you the answer. So something emotional, something dramatic, something that makes a claim. These are all in the more salesy driven area. If it's a LinkedIn post, it might be slightly different. But it's, there are still going to be general rules that you can apply. And it's worth remembering that, the piece of advice that writers give to each other the most tends to be, I would just start here. Yeah. You still get that all the time. It's almost like it's like a writer's cliche. It's like, when you've been doing it a long time, you think, yeah, I'll like sweated over that line. And somebody said, I just start here. And it's like, wow, yeah. Because maybe that's the case. Maybe you do, like I said at the start, I find this quite hard, but maybe you do just try and start writing or use one of those archetypes to get you in. And somewhere in that piece of writing will be a brilliant first line, just a brilliant collection of words. Yeah. I'll give you an example, right? So this episode is running the risk of getting too highfalutin, but there's a Rolling Stones song, I think it's Jumpin' Jack Flash, that starts with the line, "I was born in a crossfire hurricane," right? Now, I don't really know what that means. I sent it to my friend the other day. So what a brilliant piece of songwriting that is. And we don't agree on these things. He wrote back and said, well, I don't understand what it means. And I said, why does that matter? Why does that mean it's no good? Don't you think it's a great collection of words? And he said, but what does it mean? And I said, well, if I had to think about it, it's probably about the Blitz, isn't it? He was born in the 40s. I was born in a crossfire hurricane. It's probably about bombs. But why does that matter? I looked up and he was right. And he said, well, that wasn't obvious to me. And we could do a whole thing about my disagreements with my friends. But it's just a great collection of words in that sense. And sometimes that's all it needs to be. Now, that's hard to write when the page is blank. But sometimes you're going to write something and something in there is just like, I don't know why it meets none of the criteria, but that line that you've written there, just get that at the top. It's just brilliant. It's poetry almost. And sometimes it's that, and often it'll be somebody else that picks that. You know, for instance, when whoever wrote that song, whether it's Keith Richards or Mick Jagger, do you think he wrote that line first? I don't know. I mean, maybe songwriters are tapping into something else, but I think it's far more likely that, I don't know, that those words arrived.
I imagine they did. You see enough notes and line notes.
You know what I mean?
Where they're crossing things out and moving around.
Somehow.
That's how you work it. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just about the perfect. Now I know a song is different to a piece of copy, so we shouldn't, labour that comparison. But sometimes it's just a great collection of words. So it doesn't have to meet all these rules, and maybe the best ones are just that. I don't know why that's great, and I couldn't write it by design, but I got it on the page, and by God, it's going at the top.
I'm annoyed at myself because it's in my book actually, but it's the song "Hurricane" by Bob Dylan to continue the hurricane.
Yeah.
Maybe you just need the word hurricane in every.
Yeah, just right. Dear reader, I was born in a crossfire hurricane.
Maybe in the edit we'll have it play out the song. But if you go and look at that, the lyrics to that song, it opens with, I think it's something like Pistols rang out or something, and it's just a brilliant opening like image that gets you, and there's drama, and it's there, and it's and that always sticks to me in openings.
But that's a story.
It's a story.
That's a story. Yeah. That's, I mean, the ultimate, just put them into the story.
I was desperately trying to, in my head then, think of like a meta way to end on the opening line and the intro of this episode. Unfortunately, my mind is not that powerful, and I can't. So,
well, how about this? I think we should ask everybody at home to send in either their favourite first lines of it can be of a novel, a song, or a piece of copy, or
favourite piece of copy opening.
Well, no, or of copy that they've written, or they send in just the first line of a piece of copy that they're working on, nothing else.
Yeah.
Or just the first two lines. I don't know. I'd like to see some. Maybe we could do a quick fire episode where we go through. I don't know if we'll be able to improve them, but it is a fascinating subject.
Yeah. So send us your openings, and we will maybe try and put together an episode of just openings, which will constantly introduce every 2 minutes during the episode. But,
it would be a little bit like what's that film where it constantly restarts? He forgets his memento.
It would be an episode of Memento. I've now got this image of this episode already being cut up and just introducing itself halfway through. Maybe we should do that.
But, we're not clever enough to do that.
We'll leave that for now. If you, as I say, email us your first lines, and also any other copy challenges or any copy you want us to look at, and we will be back again soon. Thank you very much for joining us, Nick. You had no choice, as I am holding you hostage. Unknown amount of artillery behind the cameras, but despite that,
it's always a pleasure, Glenn.
Thank you, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon. And there we have it. We hope you got something valuable out of today's episode of The Fix.
Maybe it sparked an idea or two for your next writing project. Maybe it triggered a new headline, opening line, or story to tell your reader.
Maybe it inspired you to scrap what you have and start over. Or maybe it made you want to submit your current work in progress for a little constructive feedback. If that is the case, send your copy to us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. Or if you don't want us to review a specific piece of writing, send us a problem you're trying to solve,
or a challenge you want input on, and we'll do our best to help.
And remember, if you like The Fix, please do share it with other writers, business owners, and marketers.